I'm Allison Van Dyke. I'm the Executive Director of the Temple of Understanding, and I want to welcome you to this Ecological Justice for All dialogue entitled Youth Climate Activism, Taking Action in Times of Crisis. This is an ongoing program of the Temple of Understanding, a 63-year-old interfaith organization whose mission is to advocate for interfaith values in the secular setting of the United Nations and as an NGO around the world. Our focus has basically been to increase the awareness of religious teachers, activists, leaders of our climate crisis and its negative impact on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, we're working on peace, justice, human and women's health and safety, food sovereignty, and ecological regeneration. This program is also part 2 of a program to integrate our Temple of Understanding summer internship program. So at the end of the talk that you'll hear today, you will also you'll be able to meet some of our interns, and they're going to ask questions of our panelists. Our panelists this morning are Aniya Butler. She's part of Youth versus Apocalypse in California. John Paul Mejia, who is the official spokesman for Sunrise Movement. Jamie Minden, Global Organization Director for 0 Hour. And Mars Vazquez-Plyshevsky from Fridays for Future New York City. Welcome, all of you. And Aniya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so to start us off, it would be great if everyone could just introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the organization that you're with and the work that y'all do. Sorry, maybe Jamie can start.
Sure, thanks, Aniya. So I'm Jamie. I'm the Global Organizing Director of 0 Hour, and 0 Hour is a group that was started out back in 2018. We were one of the first groups to do climate marches. Our first climate march in 2018 took place in 25 countries all over the world. And afterwards, a girl named Greta Thunberg messaged us on Instagram and said, I'm really interested in what you guys do. And so it's a group that I guess kind of started out early on in the climate movement. We aim to ensure a natural, healthy, sustainable planet for all future generations. And we're mostly a youth-based organization, but we welcome intergenerational support. Our current campaign is around liquefied natural gas right now, and I'd love to talk more about that later on, but I will pass it on to JP.
Thanks, Jamie. And thank you, Aniya. And thanks for everyone who put this on together today. I'm really happy to be here. I'm JP. I'm a spokesperson for Sunrise Movement, which is a political movement led by young people that is building an army of organizers across every part of the United States to demand a Green New Deal. The plan in mind to stop climate change, create millions of good jobs in the process, and bring communities along in the transition to a cleaner and safer and more dignified world that have been often left behind. And so that's who I'm here repping today. Sunrise is primarily a political movement, right? We target policymakers and get involved in politics directly here in the US. And that is what we are sort of all about right now. We're running trainings and campaigns all across the country to win local Green New Deals at the levels of cities, communities, states, and so on. And we're also running a Green New Deal for Schools program and summer camp this summer, so we can start building the Green New Deal in our schools. And that's me. I'll pass it over to Mars.
Hi, I'm Mars. I work mainly with Fridays for Future New York City. And I think we have a really multifaceted approach, but our main thing is visibility and organizing strikes. We strike every Friday after school in front of City Hall, or actually, I guess it depends on the week. I think recently we've been in the financial district, but sometimes in City Hall. It depends on what we're currently focusing on. But I guess historically it's been around City Hall. And we also organize about 2 really major climate strikes each year. So we're currently gearing up to our September 17th climate strike, which is shaping up to be another like really, really massive strike like we had in 2018, 2019. And we're partnering with a lot of other organizations. So we don't have like one thing that's our main focus, but I would say we're mainly known for striking. And currently, for instance, one of our major projects has been working with groups like Triage to pressure Mayor Adams into enforcing Local Law 97, which would like curb the carbon emissions of large buildings. But yeah.
Thank you all. Y'all are doing some amazing work. My name's Aniya. I work with Youth versus Apocalypse based in Bay Area, California. I'm based in Oakland, California, Chochenyo Ohlone territory. And Youth versus Apocalypse is a predominantly youth-led group fighting for climate justice, specifically focusing on intersectional and environmental justice. And I think our main point of strategy is just meeting folks where they're at, and being involved in the community and just going to the community. And so we are in schools, we have school clubs. We also have 3 different campaigns, 2 at the state level, 1 at the local level. And then my personal role is I direct the Hip Hop and Climate Justice Initiative, which focuses on engaging young people in the movement through hip hop. And I also coordinate our No One Is Disposable action planning team, which is the team that focuses on organizing actions. And yeah, YVA started off as just a group of young people fighting against a coal terminal being built in West Oakland, and it has grew into this amazing organization that has about 22 school clubs, 3 different campaigns, 2 different teams, and just multiple different ways to get involved, focusing on community and uplifting the voices that have been historically silenced and left out of these conversations when talking about what progressive climate justice looks like. So that's a little bit about YVA and everyone here's work. Very excited to be here with you all. Yeah, so thank y'all for introducing yourselves. Before we get more into just what y'all do as organizers and as activists, it would be great to know and talk about sort of what is your guiding spiritual or religious principle that helps motivates your climate-focused work. And anyone can jump in.
Sure, I can jump in. I wouldn't say that I affiliate myself with any like major religion or any religion that necessarily has a name to it. But for me, I think that like just a genuine love for like human beings and the planet and for others, and just like a lot of like just personal journey in understanding that like it's not naive to think that people are good and that like goodness exists in the world. It's just like a hopeful outlook on life. And I think that that's helped me more than anything, just like stay motivated, because people don't have like, not everyone, but like most people don't have bad intentions. And just going through life with knowing that like others have their goals and others have their stories and others have their reasons. And sometimes the reason is like they want money and they are greedy and, like they are kind of like the bad person in the climate fight. But like every person has a life worth living, and every person deserves a chance to live regardless of where they were born, regardless of like what their life circumstances are. So I just say like genuinely caring about others. I would say that's kind of my guiding spiritual belief.
I guess I can go next. Yeah, I think sort of like Mars, I don't prescribe to a particular religious institution, but I was raised with religion, and I think that the belief that really guides me is that I don't think humans are a superior species. I don't think we're above anybody else. I think we're just part of the ecosystem, and I think that all creatures are deserving respect. Our species is creating conditions on Earth right now that are making it extremely difficult now and eventually impossible for much of life on Earth, including our own human brothers and sisters, to survive and thrive. And that really goes against everything I believe in. So I think that would just be my principle. JP?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess that the climate movement is non-denominational, I guess, but I think faith is incredibly wrapped up into the climate movement, and it wouldn't function without it. I was like never really a kid into politics, but there was a moment where, after hurricanes sweep through Miami, or right after Parkland happened 30 minutes away from me, that I felt a feeling of disposability, that no one was showing up for me. Not the people who were elected to represent and protect me, not the people who swore they cared about young people or the people in my community. No one showed up. And I remember feeling really sad and hopeless and disposable when those things happened. And I also remember seeing that there was hope in some of those moments when people came together to care for each other or build movements on the other side of those issues. And I think that that's just been the sort of like key to every moment of progress in history. The idea that, or the willingness to try in the face of an insurmountable odd just because it's the right thing to do, is what faith is. Believing in yourself and in other people, and that you deserve not to give up on the people and places that you love because there is a fight that is right for you to take on, is what faith is. And I think that the climate movement is no different to that, right? And I think that because of that spiritual groundedness, like, it is important not to leave anyone behind as we take on this fight, right? But yeah, I think it's important for us to remind ourselves and hold on to that faith every day, because it's also like the moment that the opposition, fossil fuel CEOs, the politicians they employ, and the media that they operate, the moment that they have successfully gotten you to give up on hope, is the moment that they've won before you've even leveraged any single fight against them. And that's why I think faith is so important in the climate movement, for sure.
Thank you. I think for myself, I also grew up in a religious household, but I think the main thing for me is just that I know for how I got involved in the climate movement, which was first, I was really involved in just issues that were impacting the Black community, and what I saw that I was experiencing, but also what my community was experiencing. And so recognizing that's just one aspect and one part of the oppression that millions of people are experiencing across the country, that is stemming from all these systems that our country have been founded on. And so I think recognizing that's just one part of this really, really, really broken and messed up puzzle. I think having a feeling of empathy, but just openness to involve and include other perspectives, and making sure that we're listening to each other, and that we recognize that although we have different struggles, they're still rooted in the same cause. And so just having the will to be like, although our struggles are different, the stems and the foundations are the same. And so let's be together and have resilience, which our ancestors have done for centuries, and continuing that practice. And at least for me, being really intentional around just having empathy, realizing that we're all humans. This is very, very hard work. Other than organizing, surviving as just a frontline person is very hard. So just acknowledging that and recognizing that, and seeing that resilience is part of the resistance, is part of the fight against these big corporations and foundations of oppression. So I think just recognizing that and knowing that we're sort of all playing a part in it, and that we all have some role in this, at least for me, has been a principle that helps motivate my work. But thank y'all for answering that question. So I guess in your work, what do y'all see as some strengths and some successes that y'all have experienced and witnessed?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if this is necessarily what you were asking for, but like a success that we had recently was that the AO, the advisory opinion to the UN, that like Fridays for Future New York City was really fighting for over the last year, like got passed, and like that was really exciting. But just in general, like seeing the amount of people that like maybe didn't know about it and then saw it and then like got super involved, or the amount of people that I've seen like mobilized against EACOP, the East African crude oil pipeline recently, has just been really cool. And like the amount of like really cool people that I've met who are doing this work I guess just people power has been really cool to see.
Yeah, I guess from the perspective of Sunrise, it's sort of this moment is one of critical reflection, at least here in the United States, where I think that movements like Sunrise and Zero Hour and Fridays for Future and so many others, Gulf South for a Green New Deal, Sierra Club, just the entire sort of ecosystem of the climate movement, including labor and racial justice groups, like made the current political moment that we had past summer with getting the first ever major US climate bill across the finish line and through Congress, like that is a big deal. And that's not to say that that bill is perfect. It's in fact very, very far from perfect, with the people and places that it sacrifices. But I think that it is a reflection of the moment that we're in, which is fundamentally different from where we were 4 years ago before our movements really had a lot of power. The bill is a reflection of this moment, right? It's a reflection of this moment in which a centuries-old fossil fuel industry that has captured our political process still clearly has a lot of power. And it is also reflective of the fact that within, a decade, the climate movement has started contesting for power quite seriously and is now an active political flank within political institutions and in the base of the electorate and the country that is really salient and like matters to people, right? And so I like constantly think back to the organizers who were here before me in Sunrise Movement, who had the willingness to, just sort of make some noise and be like, oh man, like no one's really like, we're all leading our divestment campaigns on campuses and we're doing really well, but this isn't going to stop the problem. We need to make a massive federal intervention in how we talk about climate change in US politics, make it an urgent issue, elect a block of allies within, build a movement outside, and make this a priority. And I think that, like a year after they had that thought, they sat in on the office of Nancy Pelosi talking about a Green New Deal with their newly elected ally, AOC. And, 1 year after that, every presidential debate candidate on the Democratic stage was asked about their stance on a Green New Deal. And a year after that, the person who, candidate Biden, who ended up being the nominee, embraced the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. And then there was a coal baron that was trying to, who also plays senator, who was trying to decimate any sort of climate funding in that bill. And yet climate was the aspect of this massive piece of policy that remained the largest in funding. So I think we're in a moment of strength and success after that, but we're also trying to pick up the pieces of just having spent so much energy and not knowing where to go next, which I imagine might be the next question, but I'll let you go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I think when I first heard this question, it made me really pause and think a bit, because it's really hard to think about success when so many people are on the front lines. So many people, I worked with JP on the, it was then Build Back Better, now the Inflation Reduction Act. And, in the moment that was a success, but now we're looking at more and more people on the front lines of, more liquefied natural gas terminals, more drilling sites in the United States. And so it's hard to think of like success when you're dealing with those metrics, right? But we have to have joy, as we've said, and we have to have hope. And I think JP really hit the nail on the head in the idea that like we, the people, are like my hope, and Mars, you said the same thing. I mean, I think that the success that we've built as a movement, not just Zero Hour, but the entire climate movement in general in this country is, the fact that we've really changed, like, as you said, JP, the public discourse, but also just brought so many people into this like understanding as a nation. And of course, there's a long way to go for sure. But I think we're at the point now where we can say like, the issue is not people not understanding. The issue is corporation governments not being willing to make the change that we need. But the good thing is that there's way more of us than there are of them. And so I do believe that we have we're on that tipping point of like the power balance where we can really make a big difference as people, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's hard to look at success, right? But I think it's something I'm working on because it's much easier to keep fighting when you give yourself a little space like that. So that's something I'm working on personally. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about this, though, Aniya.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I think this year YVA is a very grassroots group, and so we grew from like having 4 staff to like 17 staff, which was really cool and just good to see more people involved in our community in that way. We got to be really more involved in school clubs this year. So I think we're about 22 different school clubs, a large base in Oakland, and then we grew a lot in San Francisco also this year, and just some throughout the East Bay. And so it was just also good to be involved in our communities that way too. In my area of work for hip hop and climate justice, we grew the hip hop and climate justice team and organized 3 different open mics and community showcases on specific themes for folks to come talk about just the work that they're doing in climate, but to also sort of have resilience be an active resistance, and just let people know that like there needs to be a time for rest, especially as folks who are always on the front lines, and a time just to experience and compress with that community. And so those open mics were a successful space for that. With our campaign work, I think there were like a lot of different just highs for us, but I think I want to highlight the CalSTRS campaign, which is focusing on the state of California pensions fund, the state of California Teachers Public Pensions Fund, and their divestment money being invested into the fossil fuel industry, $6 billion. And so there was this bill created by a coalition, one that YVA is part of, SB 252, which is calling for divestment. And that bill has passed the Senate, which was also a big win, especially for folks who have been working on that for a long time. And so that's been getting passed along, and that will call for divestment along with the participation and just moving forward of CARB, which was just passing the Clean Fleet Bill, which is the banning of diesel trucks by 2036. Which a lot of youth participated in through public hearing and through talking to others, just adults, to get on board along with youth. And so there's been a lot of just being with our community and just being there and providing the resources and education for folks, but also a lot of organizing and getting folks to spaces, to these places to speak out. And so I would say this year has definitely been a good year. Of course, everyone has their obstacles and challenges, but I just love seeing youth step up in their leadership in different ways and just being involved in the community in this way. So yeah, that's a little bit about how YV's work has been going. We all have highs, but I think we also all have those obstacles and those challenges as well. And so it would be great if y'all could share just any obstacles that y'all have encountered regarding your activist work.
I mean, I guess like on a personal level, burnout is awful and has been such a thing for me for a little while, and then just like stress from every other segment of life. But organizationally, I think it's been a lot of like, we've been asking for the same stuff for so long that I feel like it becomes background noise to all these politicians. Like they know there's always going to be like that group of kids nagging them, you know, about this, that, and the other. And I just feel like because we've been asking for the same things for so long, and it's such simple things that just need to get done at a governmental level, it's become like something that a lot of these politicians feel like they can brush off. And as much as like climate's become such a big issue for voters, like I was phone banking and I would ask people like, okay, what's your big political issue? And so many of them said climate. As much as it's become such an issue for, you know, the people who are electing these politicians, like they're not like taking it as seriously as they need to be. Like it is so difficult to get a politician to care, not just to say they care, but to like put genuine effort behind it. And like there's the politicians who already are doing it and they're great, they're excellent, but they aren't enough. Like we need more politicians to like actually look us in the eyes and be like, yes, I'm doing it, and this is how I'm doing it, and then follow through and do the things that they're saying that they're doing. It's frustrating.
I can add on. I think personally also burnout, and just balancing everything with organizing, but just like regular life and school. And so that was, I finished my junior year, and so that was definitely like a time for me, well, at least right now, to just chill out. Even though that's not the case, but definitely not as much like burden. I think organizationally, I think I share that same frustration with just like, we've been working on some of these things for such a long time. It's clear the solutions are there, the answer is clear, but yet our leaders are just not doing what we need them to do. And I think that can be very frustrating, especially for me, when I'm supposed to be a person who is like organizing folks into this. And so just having like that sentiment where it's like, I do have hope, and just to always kind of be okay, because a lot of people are expecting you to be okay and to have that hope and to always be that leader, I think sort of adds to that burnout, just because I think, at least for me, it's okay to sometimes feel like, sad, because that is normal, that is human. But sometimes it can be hard in this work, just because you're always expected to keep going. And so I think to have that keep going mindset, in addition to like be totally fine while you're keeping going, I think has been a challenging thing for me, but I think also just for a lot of folks that I've seen and got to work with. But I'm hoping that will get better, and that our leaders will start to do what we need them to do.
I'm in the same boat as you. I just finished my junior year, and now it's college applications time, and I'm like, no, I've got to like deal with like another whole set of issues. But yeah, so I've been on a little bit of a break from like activism, because it's just so much. But it's like tough, because it's like everyone is dealing with the same burnout at the same time, but like someone needs to be doing it. Yeah, no, it's a situation.
I completely agree. I didn't realize how young you guys are. This is really impressive, the work you're doing. I think I agree. Emotional burnout is really the part that hits home, because it's like you said, Mars, not only that you are feeling it, but everybody else is. So you're having to pick up the slack where people are having to take time off, and then you're having to take time off. And so it's hard. You're constantly having to retrain people, I think, or train new volunteers, which is great. There's always new volunteers, but it's hard when people leave. So I think that's like consistently what I have the most issues with. But like I started, like you both, organizing, I think when I was like 13. So I was organizing through high school, and I was trying to work to support my family and myself as well. And it's like, I don't know, it's just a lot on top of everything. During college, my freshman year, I definitely got physically sick from the burnout and the organizing. Because it's very, it's a very emotionally involved fight. It's a very spiritually involved fight. It's work that, a lot hinges on. And so there's a lot of pressure I put on myself. But I think I was kind of a downer on the last question. So I will say there is a lot of hope alongside these obstacles. Because, it's like I guess I can talk about this more later, but every person I really, I guess maybe once a week I talk to a person that I wouldn't expect to talk to about this. A family member, a friend, literally a stranger. And, they shared like my same passion for fighting for this work. And so, they share the same outrage about these obstacles. And so I think that is a part of obstacle that is bringing us together at this moment, which is nice. I'll pass it to JP.
I'll keep this short for time, and also because you guys just said a lot of what I feel. But I also just think that we had a lot of momentum from 2018 to 2019. And I think that there was a really unified and clear story to tell about the rise of young people in that moment, and who we were clearly targeting as lawmakers and so on, with a vision in mind of how we could transform our world before COVID and before so much. And I think that, you know, to a large extent, the sort of veneer that got stripped up when COVID hit, and when, you know, this entire country and many around the world like got agitated into, you know, beyond passive support into active support in defense of Black lives. Like, I think there was a lot of energy there, and there was a lot of momentum for our movements there, and there was a lot of ways to like build real power and build a really strong ecology in the climate justice movement across like labor, racial justice, climate groups, students, and so on. And there was also, you know, having to deal with like, you know, the entire uprisings in defense of Black lives in the summer of 2020, and seeing like police budgets bloat right after, and seeing many parts of the movement be, you know, co-opted into marketing. I think something similar happened with the climate movement. And so there's like a diversity of strategy that we need to be, you know, like constantly thinking about. How do our movements stay in our hands to serve us and to continue being powerful and to continue having energy, which is always an art and a science that's really hard to master as organizers, but is what we're constantly trying to do. And we're also in a pretty different political moment at the time where, you know, like maybe we could even have as much power as we want. And I think we all speak as students here. And there is still this unelected body of religious clerics, basically, the death cult known as the Supreme Court, that can just sort of slash any form of progress in the process. And I think students are a clear target right now, both at the highest institutional level as a Supreme Court, all the way down to school boards, where people want to legislate some students out of existence entirely and shut down our voices. And I think when that happens, you know, like, we have to characterize this moment as the fulfillment of a strategy that, you know, our opposition, a dangerous coalition of, you know, like really extremist people, you know, some corporate alliances, some white supremacists, are really rolling back a lot of the progresses of the 20th century. And the environmental movement and the racial justice movements and gender justice movements are a part of that. And they did that by mobilizing and organizing small but very vocal bases of people over the past 50 years. And it's like, we obviously need to be doing the same thing in order to meet the threat of this moment. And yet we're on such a shorter time scale. And so it's hard to balance all of those things and know what to do with your responsibilities as a leader in this moment, and like make really responsible strategic decisions, and also make them in an environment broadly in social movement world in which we have pretty low energy right now. And we're trying to tell a coherent story about this moment and how we should organize and mobilize in a really confusing setting. And so that's definitely a huge obstacle right now that I think a lot of us are trying to move through.
Thank you, JP. Thank you all for sharing some of the challenges that y'all have experienced. So I guess transitioning to a more hopeful note, in your area, do you see sort of young people rising in numbers, and are they concerned and involved with climate awareness and climate engagement? And does this give you hope?
Yes, not as much as I would hope, but yes, definitely. Like, our last few strikes have kind of been like dwindling in numbers, but it's looking like this is shaping up to be a much larger one. And it's also just like all of the young people around me care. Like, all of us care. A lot of people just don't really know what to do with it. And a lot of people just don't have the energy to do it, because like so many things that we thought were like guaranteed, like abortion, like being allowed to be gay in public, just so many things that like seemed very guaranteed, are now no longer guaranteed. So there's not as many people who care about like climate specifically, as opposed to like just all of the things that are going on. But I'm definitely noticing like everyone cares about climate to some extent. They might not be like actively doing something, but like they care. So I've definitely noticed that. And I think that that's really important.
I can add, I would also say yes, definitely. I think especially since the pandemic, every year, I see more young people getting involved and trying to direct that care to action into the day-to-day work. And so I would say that definitely gives me hope, just because I think if you care and you're willing to act on that care, that will push us through. And so it's good to see more young people being involved. I would say that it is hard to do, especially I think in the communities that I'm in and that we're working with, just because, like I said, people are just focusing on surviving and getting through the day to day. That this work asks a lot of people. And so sometimes it can be hard. And so I just really appreciate for all the folks that have stepped up to get past that and to get involved, regardless of what they're dealing with. So yeah, always good to see that.
Yeah, I see. I honestly, I've been having a good past few weeks, particularly because of how I see young people shaping up to this moment right now. Like I remember back, it was like January of 2020, and I was invited to my first ever Sunrise high school training, and I didn't even know what Sunrise was. I was very confused about the whole thing, but I stepped into this space with a bunch of young people who had big dreams about the world and big dreams about what this country could be and big dreams about the sort of challenges that we could solve and who we could bring along. And we had a plan to win. And I was like, oh, those are the only two things I need. And then the rest is just lit. It's fun. And I feel like I got carried into the movement that way. And then, got really involved, became like a staff person, came out of that. And now like we're in this moment of like, what are we doing? And this summer, we at Sunrise Movement are running a summer camp for high schoolers to come and learn how to build campaigns for Green New Deals in our schools and tackle on the bully legislators who are trying to distract us and divide us, and actually rise up to the power of what we want our schools to orient themselves to our communities and to our changing climate. But anyways, like not too long ago, I spent a weekend with just like 50 high schoolers who were going to train other high schoolers on a lot of this content. And it was just awesome. Like there is a new, and I mean, I'm like literally like talking to you guys who are in high school right now. There's not that much difference between us, like only a couple years, but it's like awesome to think that there's an entire like micro generation right after the one that I was just raised into in the climate movement that's like fully committed to doing stuff, even as the world seems so bleak. And I think that's the inherent power that young people have right now, right? Like, we're not going to take no for an answer, because this is a world that we're growing up with. Like, we'll have to live through the decisions that are being made in this world. And if we don't start making those decisions, yeah, it just sort of falls on us. And so I really do see, like, from a level of like moral responsibility as young people to shape the world that we grow up in, a lot of excitement and commitment to the movement. That's really cool right now.
Yeah, I think increase in awareness and concern and like willingness to fight the climate crisis is just inevitable because as the climate crisis worsens, more and more people are going to become more and more aware of their inherent stake in this fight, and the fact that our survival really hinges on it. And so and I've really seen that play out, as we've all said. Like I've really seen some amazing organizers take up the work. On my own team, I work in global organizing, and so we have folks on my team from all over the world. We've got Own, who's from Pakistan. He's joined the movement after floods. He really took over his country last year, and he's been fighting long and hard. He joins calls at midnight because he's like, because of the time difference, he's looking to do this work. He's so passionate. We've got Michael, who's not on our team per se, but he is doing really amazing work in Uganda against the East African oil pipeline. And, he's been threatened. He's been, faced issues with his government, but he's still continuing to fight, and he's doing amazing work with the United Nations right now. We've got Rania from Morocco, who's also doing amazing women's UN work, who was inspired to fight when she saw the way that women in her community were being married off at a younger age because of the climate crisis, and were taken out of school because of the climate crisis. And that's what, drove her to fight. And then close to home, the organization that I first started organizing with, was passed on to a good friend of mine, Aditi Anand. And I just met with her for coffee the other day. And, just speaking with her, I was really like, this is the future of the movement. We are this future. And there's so much inspiration I get from the people that I organize with. And like I said before, pretty much like at least once a week, someone comes up to me who I've never talked about climate change with, who knows about the work I do, and, is like, how can I get involved? I really want to join this fight. And so we are concerned in large numbers. And that's what really gives me hope, because we are the one thing corporations and billionaires don't have. We are people power. And that is the one thing that could really topple the whole scale here. And so I have a lot of hope in our movement, and I have a lot of hope in the future, because I think it is just inevitable that we are going to tip the scales.
Thank y'all. I'm going to add this question because I'm personally interested, and I think the crowd might want to hear. But I think for everyone, just as individual organizers, we all have something that we want to bring to the movement. And so that's sort of what I wanted to ask y'all. What is one thing that you really hope, or one role that you really hope to have in this broader movement? And I can start since I asked the question. Sorry, y'all. But I think for me, it's mostly always been about just creativity and the willingness to think outside the box. I got involved with activism through poetry. I've been performing and writing since I was 10. And so that was sort of my entry into the movement, and how I processed things, but was also able just to express what I felt and what I was seeing and experiencing. And so I think just I would like to bring that same sense of creativity and the willingness to just think outside the box to other folks, recognizing that a lot of people may have different ways and interest of being involved and being engaged in the movement, and what seems sustainable for people. And I think that was sort of like sustainable for myself at the time, before I got into more deep community organizing work. And so I think I would just want to continue to bring that to the movement, and sort of just also putting the pieces together. I think since my perception of climate change or climate justice was really like, it's only focusing on the birds and the bees and not my communities. And it felt like it just didn't matter to me because it wasn't impacting me or wasn't involving or uplifting my voice in any way, or my community's voice in any way. And so I think I would just also want to add that sense of like, people do belong here. Frontline people are supposed to be here. They need to be here in order for us to truly achieve climate justice. And recognizing that there are so many different perspectives and experiences that need to be acknowledged and uplifted in order to truly know the right path to go on. And so I think helping being that person, just the person who would be like, you belong here, you should be here, and trying to give them a voice and a platform is something that I hope to continue to do also.
I guess, I don't know, I was thinking about this while you were answering, and I don't really think that I personally bring anything unique to the climate crisis. To the climate crisis, hopefully not, to the climate movement. I'm hoping I'm not bringing anything unique to the climate crisis, but I feel like just being like a person who exists, who is there, is my contribution. I'm not like, I'm not in charge of anything. I'm not running any organizations, but I'm just a person who exists, and I'm just a human in the world who is trying to be a human in a slightly better world than the one we are currently in. And I don't know, I also just in my like segment of organizing, I've met a few other like queer and especially trans people, but just like not nearly as many as I feel like there should be, just because of like the intersections between like colonialism and like being queer and the climate crisis. Just like there's so many movements that intersect, and I just wish that I saw like more other like trans organizers around me, I guess, is kind of. So I'm just like one of those people who can be like a trans organizer in front of other people who, you know, maybe are trying to get into the climate crisis, but like want to like see that representation. So I guess. But besides that, I don't really think I'm just a person. I'm just a little lad.
I think well, one, there's like two answers that I have here. Is that I think one, like just from a strategic level, I think the climate movement and just the climate movement in general has to be more creative and intentional about like organizing across race and class in deep ways. I think that like it just won't work if we're not doing that. And I think we've like focused a lot on mobilizing existing networks within the climate movement rather than doing some of the harder and longer, honestly, work of like organizing new people into that universe that we tap into to then mobilize. And I think that like people need to see themselves in the climate movement in order for them to join as well. Like, you know, it's like kind of wild that so many of like people I know on the front lines in Miami, whether it's like, you know, like other like working class Latinos or like people in Little Haiti who are being displaced from climate gentrification right now, like cannot see themselves in this movement, right? And I think that that's something to understand and like take responsibility for and build across, even if we may fit some of those identities as people who are in the climate movement. So that's one thing. But I also think, and I'm not trying to like kiss butt here, I like genuinely mean this, but I do think that faith is something really important to bring into the climate movement. Some level of like being able to tell the story of what you are fighting for and what like binds you to the neighbor next to you or the person that you might not know, but that might be included in the world that you are trying to, or no, that will be included in the world that you are trying to fight for. Like that's awesome. Or just like the mere process of like trying to do something and not knowing that you'll win, but doing something because it's right. And like understanding that, and that sort of being the spiritual moral bedrock that binds you together with other people, I think one, makes for really awesome storytelling. Two, I think gives people a sense of like moral groundedness. And then three, I think actually makes irrelevant a lot of the like dumb conflict that can sometimes happen in spaces where we can actually trust each other to get into conflict with each other and do that as a form of love rather than as a form of difference. But yeah, there's a lot of growth to be had in the climate movement right now. And I really appreciate that question, Aniya, because I think that like the creativity of what everyone has said, like makes me also feel hopeful, which connects to the like former question.
I agree. I think it's a really good question to ask for everyone to ask themselves, even if you're involved in the climate movement now or if you're hoping to be, because I've seen a lot of people burn out because they're not doing the work that they're passionate about. You know, they're making spreadsheets, but they care about art. You know, they're I don't know, they're not doing the work that makes them come alive, right? And I think that that's where people are most valuable in this movement, is when they're doing the work that makes them come alive, when they're doing the work that makes them passionate, makes them wake up in the morning and go, you know, I hate the climate crisis and I hate that I have to work on this, but I do really like, you know, working with people and recruiting, or I really like strategy, or I really like going to door and, you know, bringing my community together. And so, yeah, I think it's an important question for everyone to ask themselves. I think, like Mars said, I don't think I'm very, you know, unique. I think I'm just an ordinary person with a lot of determination. But that being said, I do like strategy. I think that, like on a personal level, at least, I do like strategy work, because I see it as like, if you don't have good strategy, you can put a lot of effort into something that's not going to pan out at all, you know, and it's going to just be really ineffective. And so, and I've seen that and I've participated in that. So I don't want to do that anymore. So strategy is really the thing that really makes me come alive, makes me really passionate, as well as working with people. So yeah, everybody should ask themselves that question though. That's a very good question.
Thank y'all for answering. Glad it wasn't too hard, because I think it is sort of like a self-reflection question also. But thank y'all. So I think on our last note, it would be great if y'all could share one thing that you hope will encourage all young people to do in the name of climate awareness and then supporting the general health of our planet.
I think this is kind of an unorthodox answer, because I know, you could say, oh, eat more vegan food or drive your car less, but I think actually becoming less individualistic and less consumerist as a person, and thinking about, actions in terms of community effort, and in terms of like thinking about yourself in terms of the community, and bringing your neighbors together, bringing the people around you together, like JP said, across class, across race, across religion, across age. I think that is really what's going to make this movement effective. Because of course, buy less stuff, shop local, eat more vegan food, things like that. But, we're not going to win this fight if we don't work together, if we don't see each other as other human beings, if we don't fight for each other, right? And I think that's one thing that corporations and those who want us to stay in the current status quo have done very effectively is, made us very individual people, right? Made us very, I'm going to support my family and take care of myself, and, not really look at the other people around me in my neighborhood. And so I think it's really inspiring to see the work y'all are doing, because you're definitely bringing community into everything you do. And so I think that's what makes this most effective, right? Is just bringing ourselves together in this collective. So it's changing your attitudes as well as changing your practices with your neighbors, with your people around you.
I would say, I guess in a, somewhat similarly unorthodox way, like just take breaks, and not just take breaks from like take breaks from everything. Take breaks from consuming, whether it's items or social media or the news. Take breaks from working, take breaks from take breaks from some of the people around you. Just like make sure that you're moving through different spaces and different people. Just like in general, make sure that there's change in your routine and your pattern, because it's difficult to see a different world when every day looks the same, and every day looks like work, and every day looks like talking to the same 3 people and then scrolling on social media for 4 hours. Just take time for yourself, take time to express yourself creatively, take time to be a human being in a human being world. And go for walks, touch grass, friends, touch grass. I think is just like an important thing. Just like exist, like feel yourself existing sometimes.
Yeah, I think that all of that is really important. And I think that just to like go back to an earlier conversation is just like cynicism can be really tempting, and like it can be so much more comforting, sad, but comforting to like believe that this isn't worth it, and that we should just like spend our time forgetting that there are problems in the world, if we have the privilege to do so, and like check out and believe that change isn't possible. And like, I think that when people are allowed to do that, it is a natural response totally to the, weight of the world feeling too crushing to have to accept and do something about every day. But that is also the moment in which like, yeah, they've won. If they can get you to stop, if they can get you to give up before you even tried fighting, like that is just a white flag. That is absolute surrender. And it is not acceptable at this moment to give up on the people and places that we love. Like that's just not an option. And so a healthy commitment to hope, a healthy commitment, a healthy discipline to either, your own involvement or supporting those who are involved in the movement, I think is a great way to constantly be plugged into the movement, right? We don't all have to be out there with megaphones, like shouting from the tops of like roofs or whatever. We all have, like Jamie said, something to offer in our own ways. We have talents, we have time. Some of us are able to offer money or places to stay. And so there are multiple ways to get involved in this, but the important thing is being involved and not being checked out or giving up.
Thank you all for answering that. I feel like a lot of great answers were said, so I'm going to try not to repeat anything. I think Jamie was touching on this earlier on a different question, but I would say just to do what you love, and to somehow integrate that into your advocacy and just organizing and activist work. I think first, it just makes it so much better to do what you love and makes it so much more sustaining and just able to do it long-term wise. But I also think it helps the movement, because I think when you're doing something you love, it just turns out to be so much more great and more impactful and more engaging. And so I would say not to sacrifice that thing. I think a lot of people think they have to give up a lot to do this work, which you somewhat have to do, but I would say just to really think about what you love and what you want to do, because I think there's always a way to implement it into this work. And so, yeah, just to do what you love, do it for yourself, but also for the movement. And I agree with what everyone has said here, so snaps to that. But thank y'all for answering those questions. That was the end of the prepared section of questions for our panelists today. I think now we're going to move into Q&A. So if anyone from the audience had any questions, they could put them in the Q&A section.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I'm working on a project on international cooperation in order to preserve the Caspian Sea. I wanted to ask a question. Have you ever had any experience, because it's my project, I wanted to ask, have you had any experience on water preservation, maybe like oceans, lakes, and like rivers, maybe about the pollution of them, plastic ban and stuff like that?
So I used to work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I was a teen conservation leader there. And so I did do work in water. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but I'd love to hear like follow up what you'd love to know. Yeah.
Yeah, just about like your experience. Maybe you did some activism on like plastic bans or like ecotourism. Maybe you did something about planting trees on the sides of the rivers that will help like river pollution. Just about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert. I have dabbled here and there in that, I've done some like conservation work with like digging in the ground and trees, and I've done some plastics ban work with the aquarium on petitions and things like that. But I'm not sure. Does anyone else have any experience with things like that?
I would say I was born and raised in Miami, and there's a couple restoration programs there, like Miami Waterkeeper is a great resource. But anyways, I think what I learned a lot from that space and that form of organizing is that there's like, I think when you're focusing on things that are that local, like there's a lot of like ecosystem services that like uphold the lives economically, socially, and culturally of a lot of people in the area. And I think that having good forms of activism that speak beyond just like protect the oceans, but also speak to people's interests and sort of bind them together as like, here's how we're fighting for like this like ecosystem to be preserved, but how we're also fighting for good jobs and how we're also fighting for like the people who live here to be able to stay here. Like, I think being able to tell that story in a campaign or any form of activism work that you're doing to bring people's interests together with what you're fighting for when it comes to conservation is like good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers.
I would also really quickly say, based on what JP's answer, like 10% of the world's population depends on the oceans for protein and for employment. And so, like JB said, we really do depend on our oceans. We do depend on our water sources. Water is life, as they say, right? And so, as we talked about before, bringing community around this shared resource and our shared need for protection of water, and showing people that, you know, those who are trying to take away our water, trying to make it, you know, unaccessible or toxic, those people are really attacking our right to life, right? And so just bringing people together around their shared interests, I think, might be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the Q&A?
Hi, my name's Hypatia. I'm one of the interns at the Temple of Understanding, and I'm doing my project on how religions or faith can be used as a solution to combat food insecurity. But I did have a question for all of you guys. Like, when you're out on the front lines, if you've been doing something for a really long time and like you can tell that action isn't working, like how are you able to like be creative or like implement like new action plans or new avenues of activism for the work that you're doing?
I guess it's marginally related to your question, but more so related to your project topic. I've been working with, not in like climate activism specifically, but in like more general activism. I've been working with a group that we use the kitchen of a place called the Catholic Worker in the city, which, you know, obviously is like a Catholic organization, but it's as someone who's personally not religious, it's really great for me to see just like the way that they're using their religion in order to just like and that the tenets of that, which do involve a lot of like care for others and care for your fellow human, and just like everyone is God's children, everyone deserves like a place to live, like food to eat, and, you know, like working kind of closely with that organization has made me like really interested in the ways that like faith can be used in these kinds of ways. So I just want to say like it's a really cool project topic. And more related to your question, I guess just incorporating different things. Like I've been taking somewhat of a break from like on the ground climate activism, but I've found like I've been doing other things like working with this organization under like the Food Not Bombs category, which isn't religious, but like we use their kitchen and we worked with them through that. Like just the way that like we can actually help people who have been like dealing with the climate crisis in other ways than just the activism, and just like more so like giving them food, giving them like their basic needs. So just for me, like coming at this from multiple angles when I've been burnt out from one, helping from another has been really like, I guess, a way for me to continue going forward.
Sorry, my bad. Thank you. I think for me, it's just about always coming back to the community. When I feel stuck, I always just go to a couple different teams that I work with for like short-term sort of goals or purposes. But I think for long-term, sort of the same thing, coming back to that community. Before the pandemic, YVA was really focused on engaging folks through actions and through a couple of campaigns. But once we were, we had to stay in the house, we couldn't really be involved in the community that way. We had to figure out just other ways to be involved. And so I think there we focused a lot on our social media strategy. That's when we produced our first music video on how hip hop and climate justice was first integrated and implemented within YVA. And so I think just looking at different creative avenues of how people can still be engaged while also recognizing people's capacity, the current state of the world because we were in a pandemic, but also just people's interest and what feels like is missing from the movement. And at that time, it was that feeling of like, we did so much action, and so much strategy. I think we needed to focus on being grounded in culture and in unity and in community during that time, especially since we were so isolated. Having something that we were sort of grounded in and that we could look to for hope, I think was an important need for that time. And so going to the community to address that need was sort of how we came up with those solutions. But yeah.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar to Anaya. I think in those moments where I feel like something's stuck and it's not worth it or working, like I go back to the drawing board, and usually if it's a campaign, like there will be like a sort of like pyramid that you divide a campaign with, which like at the top, it's like your grand strategic objective. Like what is the biggest bite of the apple that you're trying to get at? Like, and it's usually like your goal set into a sentence of like what you're going to do for a given amount of time. And then from there, there's your actual campaign. So like, what are the escalating series of tactics that you're going to use to get people on your side and build enough pressure to do this thing? And then like the most specific thing is like tactics. Like, are you going to do a petition? Are you going to do like, are you going to show up and sit in the office of a decision maker? Like, what are you going to do? And being able to like pinpoint, almost like you're playing what's that game called where you have to like the surgery game, I don't know, I forgot. Being able to pinpoint where the thing that's going wrong is actually happening, I think is a good step. And often it might be as simple as like a relationship. Like what relationship do I not have or do I need to make in a way that I maybe don't have influence over making this thing work right now, but I could get in touch with someone who might. And so those I feel like are some strategies that I have usually when I'm dealing with something like that.
Thank you for that question. Okay, we have one in the chat. I'm going to read it out loud. Hi, I believe it will never work if we keep waiting for today's politicians to be more sensitive and sincere about taking action in climate issues like Jamie mentioned. Politics is a very different world, and any politician who succeeds to get known in that arena more or less feels obliged to abide by the rules of that world. What would be better seems to be raising new generations who will be both more responsible politicians themselves and voters for such politicians. To that end, I suggest that programs and debates could be more intensified, present, and discussed with people at all ages, the already available excellent documentaries. Their possible impacts from bottom up could be more expected in achieving many targets in both urban and rural areas. What do you say? Thanks.
I read this question earlier and kind of thought of a few answers. And I think the first thing is like discounting any one method isn't really like necessarily helpful to the climate movement. Like the current politicians are there to stay for like a solid amount of time. So any work we can do in convincing them to be more amicable is great. But I also agree like that's not going to be enough. Like there's got to be a multifaceted approach. And I guess like, I guess as someone who would consider myself part of the new generation, I think we are more civically engaged and we are more, we are more likely to vote based off of issues like climate and abortion and like queer rights and like racial justice and economic justice and labor. And I just think like that kind of is happening, and there are all these things that are definitely happening, and I think we just need more energy behind them, but it's not like that any one approach is going to single-handedly solve the climate crisis, or like any one approach is going to be more important than another. I think like the point is that all of this is going to have to work together to get the world to be a slightly better place than it was yesterday.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Mars. I mean, at least from the perspective of Sunrise, it's like, yeah, like a lot of people who are in office right now, and I'm like, I'm calling in from DC right now, where I often do some work on the Hill. Yeah, some of these people have no idea what they're doing and would never bat an eye or listen to us in any possible way, because the money that they are getting from fossil fuel companies exerts power above the sound of our voices or their own constituents. But what you do in that moment, I think, is like not discount a strategy altogether, like Mars said, but you can use an institution that is right now stacked against you and infiltrate it with people you need in order to, one, get your message out there, but two, crack open the chest of resources and power that the government has, and redirect it back into the agency of movements and communities who will decide what to do with that money. And so we work on electing young, progressive, working class leaders to Congress in order to form a more palpable block of Green New Deal leaders. And so I totally hear the hesitation on that question. And the other thing that I like notice is, it's different to get involved in different areas, and like we have to raise leaders and like develop leaders and elect leaders who speak to where we come from, either urban or rural. And if you want to learn more, you can go to sunrisemovement.org for that, for the work we do.
Thank y'all. I honestly don't have much to add. I think I agree with what JP and Mars were saying. I think in addition to not counting out any specific strategy or solution, I think to also just reflect on past movements, at least has been important for me in my work, looking at the work that my ancestors and elders have done and seeing the success and progress of those, and seeing how that can sort of be mirrored and fuel this movement that we are in today. Recognizing that the climate movement is relatively new, but the active resilience and resistance and the radical work that it calls for is not new, and it has been done and pushed forward for a very long time now. And so just, looking at the work of past ancestors and elders and seeing how that can be implemented and support the work that we're doing now. But thank you for that question, and thank y'all for answering. Another question is, can you please tell us how folks can join your organization and what they can actually get involved with?
So for us at 0 Hour, we are currently working on a campaign about liquefied natural gas. Because liquefied natural gas is natural gas or fossil gas really, that's compressed and shipped across the world. And because of the Ukraine and Russian war, there's a big gap in the gas market right now. And so these liquefied natural gas companies are trying to put in 20-year contracts. They're really pushing for these 20-year contracts. And if these contracts pass, scientists are predicting that we're just from these contracts alone looking at 2.5 degrees of global temperature change instead of just 1.5. And if you know the IPCC report and the climate science, 2.5 degrees is, that spells climate disaster for our planet. And so that's why we're one of many organizations working on the LNG fight. LNG stands for liquefied natural gas. And so we're engaging young people right now around this fight. We are putting together a presentation that everyone can share in schools, and each person that views this presentation can then share this, present and train more people on how to fight LNGs. And so what we're trying to do is build this active resistance among young people, because a lot of people don't know about liquefied natural gas. A lot of people don't know how to fight. And so bringing us all together in order to really publicly attack the financial institutions and the governments that are backing this natural gas, because this gas is being drilled in the United States here. If you heard about the Willow Project or the Alaska LNG project, huge areas of federal lands that were opened up to drilling, this is all for LNG. As well as in the Gulf, where communities are really, really being impacted, like in Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where Black and Brown folks are being primarily targeted by this disaster. And so if you're interested in getting involved, I will share our email in the chat. It's info@thisiszero-hour.org. Email us and we can bring you into this work. We need a lot of young people to train people and to bring in everyone into this work. And so sorry for taking so long to say that, but please get involved.
I would say just for Fridays for Future in general, we're not like super centralized. So it totally depends on your location, like depending on the state, city, country, depending on where you are in the world, it's going to be different. But if you're in the US, I know Fridays for Future USA, I'm not sure if it's .com or .org, but if you Google Fridays for Future USA, they have a map of all the local groups. So find what's your closest local group, reach out to them. Everyone's always in need of more people. And if you're looking for any specific campaign, I guess just look at a website of a Fridays for Future, of any Fridays for Future chapter, and they'll have things. And they'll have more specific ways for you to get involved. But I don't have anything that I could tell you right now, this is the current project that we need more people on, because it really depends on where you are.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, check out all of our websites. Ours is sunrisemovement.org. You know, if you're under 35, you can get involved in the youth movement. If you're above 35, there's ways to support Sunrise as well. And you can find out about all of that on our website. We right now are like volunteer ask is to call on Biden to declare a climate emergency right now in order to unlock the powers necessary to take action in this moment through executive action, to provide, you know, housing for people in this moment, to build out renewable energy, to do things that we desperately need in this moment of extreme heat and this wild summer where we're seeing insane climate disasters. But if you want to help us out with that and add your name to that list, you can do so on sunrisemovement.org and also see what other campaigns we have going on and how you can support there.
Thank y'all. I would say for YVA also just to go to our website, youthversusapocalypse.org, where you can just find out about basically all the work that we're doing. We're based in the Bay Area, so if you are in the Bay Area, that would be more of an opportunity for you to be more like involved with YVA. So I recommend looking at our website where you can take a look at all of our campaigns and teams, but also any call to actions that we have. You can also email us, Youth versus Apocalypse, if you have any specific questions or things you would like to bring, and if you want to get added to our email listserv lists where you can just receive updates, and also follow us on social media because we also update a lot of our work on there too, and hoping to make it a little bit more fun and engaging so it will be more light for you as well. But please look up all of the group's work that were just stated and figure out a way to get involved.
Hi, my name is Mirka. I'm a summer intern for TOU. My project is on forced sterilization in Indigenous communities. And so the Green New Deal emphasizes its commitment to addressing social and economic inequalities while making that transition to a more sustainable economy. But during this transition, there are certain vulnerable and marginalized communities that might be at a higher risk of being disproportionately, affected by, unintended burdens. For example, fossil fuel workers are obviously going to lose their jobs, and communities that are heavily reliant on the fossil fuel industry are going to be disrupted. So how are you guys going to make that these communities are protected and they're supported during this transition, because obviously they are going to be affected by it?
Yeah, I can start off with that. And if anyone wants to jump in, feel free to go ahead. A central part of the Green New Deal is something called a just transition. A just transition is an essential pillar of any climate plan that's worth being even heard out. There's no way in which we are going to successfully take on a political project to decarbonize our economy if we're going to leave people behind. It's just not going to work. There's no way. And so what a just transition does is that it actually allocates the research, allocates the funding, whether it's through direct public investment and the creation of, infrastructure jobs that offer the same rate or the same wage and benefits or even higher, in renewable energy jobs, or even market ways to do that, where you are competing or opening up markets that will offer better conditions for workers and manage that transition from fossil fuel labor to renewable labor. That is part of the just transition. And so what you're essentially doing is phasing out fossil fuel infrastructure while building out renewable energy capacity at the same rate that you're phasing out fossil fuel. And labor is the central part of that, because you don't want anyone to lose their jobs or lose their form of income. And there's interesting places, not only in the United States, but around the world, where some of this is being experimented with now. And it's a tricky process, right? Because you have to get agreement from all stakeholders in that matter, not just, companies, but you need to get workers themselves on board with that. And so it's a huge political question as much as it is one of justice too.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of people like saying, you know, oh, well, we can't phase out fossil fuels or like coal extraction because look, there's like all these smaller, especially rural places that like really depend on like these industries for any money going into this community. And it's really interesting because like, yeah, that's like a tough thing. Like that is a difficult thing. There's a lot of people that will have to be retrained into a different industry. Like we can't just abandon these small towns or these like areas that are dependent on this industry for like their economy. And that is really difficult because like that is a consideration, and that's another I guess like thing to be, yeah, that's another thing to be thinking about like ways in which these people could have like could be retrained into a different industry, and like do they want to? That's definitely part of it, even though it's like really necessary for the world. Like someone's livelihood shouldn't get taken away, like for the good of everyone else. Like that it is important that we have their input, and it is important that they have autonomy and control over the way that like the transition from fossil fuels or coal into a more renewable energy is going to be. Like that's like a strong consideration that needs to exist.
Thank y'all. I feel like I don't have much to add. I feel like the experts just spoke. So yeah.
I'm just wondering if we have one more very quick question. We have about 5 minutes from some of the interns. These questions have been great. They're really, really fascinating. Not to mention the presentations, which have been fantastic. Thank you. So is there one more question, or shall we bring this to an end? Here we go. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Natasha, and I'm doing a project on corruption and humanitarian aid and how perception of it can change how much aid is given. And I might have a bit of a not the greatest overview grasp of it because I live in Los Angeles, but where the major writers and actors guild strikes are happening. But from what I can tell, there is a pretty intense air of dissatisfaction, and like was mentioned, is people are feeling disposable, and I think a lot of people are starting to strike. I know UPS is gearing up to do so, and I think quite a few I think sort of like flight services and people who work at airports are also beginning to consider it. So there's a pretty charged political atmosphere. Is that sort of spilling over into activism, especially climate change? Or yeah, basically, do you see any of that in your work where people somewhat recently in the past half year really begin to ramp up efforts?
I mean, yeah, I guess like, you know, from your perspective in LA with all the like the writers and the actors, in New York, I've heard like Broadway is like a lot of Broadway actors are considering a strike. It hasn't been declared or like officially anything, but like there's a lot of people across many different industries like strongly considering this. And we're not feeling like SAG, we're not feeling like WGA as much in New York, but like we would feel Broadway. And I think it's really interesting because every area, every population is going to have a different strike that's going to strongly affect them. And obviously, if they work in one of these sectors, like that's going to affect them. But I think like because of how many unions are kind of like stacking their strikes on top of one another, like it's going to become an issue where every single person in this country is going to be very, very directly affected by like one strike or another. And like that's going to become like a situation, and it's going to become a situation one way or another. And I think that that's going to end up being really powerful. And part of what a lot of these unions are talking about is the way in which like these organizations are treating, or these companies are treating like the climate crisis, and the degree to which like they do not care. And these unions, like they want a future, their labor, they don't want their labor going towards something that's like, you know, going to be thrown away and is like not going to be able to have any sort of positive impact, and is actively having a negative impact. And it's just it's there's a lot of unions, and a lot of them really care about the climate crisis, and that's like a topic for these strikes. So I think that like the amount of people power that's going into these strikes is really great to see and really important.
I think really quickly, I'll just say, I think that union work and striking and things like that are a really essential way for people to realize their people power, whether or not they're involved in striking for a particular thing, like, for what's going on right now with in Hollywood. You can still see the effect that people power has, and you realize, oh, like actually, if we refuse to cooperate with the institutions that are currently going on in organized fashion, we actually can make a really big difference. I had the privilege of hearing from Chris Smalls at an event I went to, or conference I was at a couple months ago. He's the union leader at Amazon, and he's very passionate about climate work. He's an amazing organizer. If you ever get the chance to listen to his work, he's fantastic, really inspirational. And so, talking about him and his work, and organizers like him that are invested in not only a safe future for workers, but also a safe future for workers that involves, climate justice, right? I think that there's a huge space for climate organizers and union workers and labor organizations to work together. I think we have the same goals in many instances. And so, like I said, I was at this conference a couple of months ago, and it was a climate and racial justice conference, but in Louisiana, but there were folks that joined us from the electricians union. There were people from the Starbucks union. There were people from the Amazon labor union, like Chris Smalls. And so I think that's really hopeful that we have a future in, labor and climate organizing that can really be effective.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful way of coming all of this together. And I want to thank you for being a moderator, and JP and Mars, your work here in all of these different areas is so important and so inspirational, all of you. This has been a fabulous discussion, and I know that our interns are more inspired than ever by the work that you're doing. So thank you, everyone, and blessings to all on your work.